Well, good morning, family. Good morning. What a special day this is today. Welcome to our Family Enrichment Sunday. And it's a great opportunity for us to really focus on family. And this year's theme is Family Matters. And this morning we have an extra special guest here today to bring us our lesson this morning on Family Matters. It's our son, Jason Masteller. And so, Jason, come up, brother, and preach the word.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to be here. I've heard such wonderful things about the family here at Waterford. We're very blessed in our family, of course, with the birth of my daughter a few months ago, and the amazing outpouring of love and gifts that we've seen to you, which is very appreciated because it means we have to get very little for them. So we thank you a lot for that. We really appreciate that. And if you stick around long enough today, you will see my daughter and wife as they join us a little bit later. So Family Enrichment Sunday and this concept, this idea of family matters. And, you know, it's really a pretty broad idea to just say the statement that family matters. Well, of course it does. And to continue with sort of the obvious statement here, it's clear to see that family matters to God. Family matters to God. Now, before you even came in this morning, you probably could have come up with that yourself and recognized it. And we saw it in our verse that was read this morning. That right away in the beginning of creation, after Adam is made, God views the situation, and of course, he knows what he's going to do before he does it, but he views the situation and recognizes that man was not made to be alone. Man needs a helper. And in Genesis chapter 2, right after this world and earth is created by God, God creates the family. We now have a husband and wife. They will have children later, and we know that's a disaster, but they will have children later. But right now, we have the beginning of the nuclear family. And it is of such essence and importance that it is created in the very beginning. Because what God recognizes is something that you and I know really well. And that's the fact that no man is an island. Apologies to Paul Simon. But no man is an island. We weren't made to be alone. We weren't made to be by ourselves. The family is an integral and important part of our existence. And God sees that and recognizes that in a very early moment and shares with us the importance that family is. Family matters. You know, this phrase, no man is an island, comes from a poem by John Donne. And it reads like this: no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. If a promontory were, as if were any manner of thy friends or thine own were, any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. What John Donne is doing here in this poem is really reflecting an experience that we can all relate to. But he's going to a deeper level to show us the interconnectivity of all of mankind. He says if a little piece of dirt falls off of Europe, the entire continent is affected. Just in the same way as if a promontory, which is like a big rocky sort of jutting out into the ocean, just as if that were to fall. That it matters not whether it's a huge significant moment or just a small thing. That every man's death takes a piece away from us. That we as humanity are interconnected beyond what maybe we can understand. To me, that sounds like a family. I mean, isn't that what a family is? He says that he is involved in mankind. Anybody have a family that's involved in your life? Why are you laughing? But this idea that involved in mankind, we are interconnected. We are involved in the lives of each other, even if we don't intend to be or desire to be, just by the fact that we are in close proximity to one another. We are involved. And that's what a family is. A family is a group of people that are connected by a commonality, which is important for us to understand because for most of us, the term family, the connection between us is blood or by marriage. But we're talking about the people who are closest related to us. But that's not the only form of a family. I mean, sports teams love to use this all the time, right? The idea that we're a family, we're bonded together by this commonality, the desire to be successful in this athletic endeavor. Maybe sometimes your workplace says, hey, we're a family. Not when it comes to time to ask for a raise, but it says, we're a family, right? I mean, they mean that more when they want you to pick up the next shift. But we have this idea that a family is a group of people. We are connected by some common thought, some common thread. And we are interconnected with one another in a way that is inseparable. And that's truly why family matters. Because as connected people in this group with one another, and we interact with one another, and we impact the lives of each other, well, that matters a lot to us. Because what it tells me is that what happens to you affects me. And what I do affects you. That matters. Now, if you're like me and you grew up in a particular time, if you're part of my generation and you were alive and being raised in the 90s, then this phrase, family matters, probably means something different to you. You were probably thinking of this family, the middle-class Winslow family in Chicago. And like most television sitcoms, their lives were tumultuous at times, but nothing that 22 minutes couldn't resolve. But most of the issues in the Winslow family were not caused by the Winslows themselves. They were most frequently caused by their neighbor, one Stephen Urkel. And upon surveying the damage that was done by his typically clumsiness or well-meaning intentions, he would survey the flaming wreckage of life around him and declare, did I do that? So there are some of you who are suppressing the instinct to do an Urkel impression right now. And I apologize to your family because you'll do it on the way home. But Urkel looks around and says, did I do that? And what we see is that even though he wasn't part of the family, he desired to be. And his actions had far-ranging consequences to those around him, much to Carl's dismay. The fact that if I do something, it impacts you, my family. See, and that's what we really want to understand this morning, is that the actions in the family matter. What you do in your family matters. Sometimes we get this idea that family is there to support us, to serve us. We take that helper side of Genesis 2 very seriously, that, well, you're my helper, so take care of me. But the reality is that family is there for us to interact with, to grow together in, meaning that the things that I do actually matter more than the things that you do. Because the things that I do are the things I can control. And recognizing that that has an impact on our family is vital. It matters. Well, let me just give you some examples here. How about some of the actions in these families? I mean, we could call them the first family of the Old Testament, right? All of the descendants of Abraham, the chosen people. But it begins all the way back at the start, in the beginning of Genesis, with the children that I mentioned. The actions of Cain, well, they affected his family, yes? I mean, it really speaks to humanity that by 3 chapters in, the perfection that God has created has been destroyed, and a first murder occurs. the jealousy of Cain affects his family. Noah in Genesis chapter 9, the great patriarch Noah has a moment of weakness. He grows a vineyard. And we all know what happens to grapes after a while. Noah drinks the wine, gets drunk, apparently likes to sleep in the nude. And his sons come upon him. And it causes Ham, who then births the generations of the land of Canaan, to sin in seeing his father's nakedness. Noah's choice impacted his family and the generations after him. Of course, we know Abraham, and Abraham did everything perfect and right, and so we can skip over him here. Well, of course not. In Genesis 12, Abraham travels to Egypt with Sarah. He's concerned because she's very beautiful and that he might be killed so that the Pharaoh can have her as his wife. So Abraham lies. And Sarah is taken into the harem of Pharaoh, by which then God has to deliver her out of. So Abraham learns his lesson until Genesis chapter 20, and he does it again, but with Abimelech. The actions that we take matter in our families. Well, just in case you were feeling good about yourselves, ladies, we have a woman up here. Rebecca, of course, was married to Isaac, has twins, and apparently was not a very easy pregnancy. They feuded and warred her sons, Jacob and Esau. But Rebecca played favorites. Of course, loved Jacob more than Esau. And so she tricked her husband, Isaac, into giving the blessing to Jacob, which then destroyed their relationship. Her actions mattered. Well, Laban is Rebekah's brother, Jacob's uncle. Jacob falls in love with Laban's daughters, but of course he loves Rachel, and Laban, knowing that Rachel is the second born, pulls the old switcheroo on Jacob and slides Leah in on the wedding night. So now he's married to her. Forces Jacob, in his love for Rachel, to work 7 more years for her hand. His actions mattered. We're barely past halfway through Genesis. And the actions of family members change the course of the history of these families forever. We see Cain, a bad brother. Noah, a bad father. Abraham, a bad husband. Rebekah, a bad mom and wife. Laban, a bad uncle. No matter what the relationship in the family is, we can find bad actors in the Bible. To illustrate the fact that our point is that the actions that we take in our family matter. What we do. All of these people on this list did things out of what they would deem to be good intentions for themselves, or maybe for somebody else, but good intentions for themselves. But what happened is the result is their bad actions caused bad things to happen to other people. Because your actions in the family matter. Well, okay, let's pull it off of this just sort of generic phrase that the actions matter, and let's just say what it is. Your behavior in the family matters. Now, I always think that phrase, that change of word there is important because actions sounds very adult, right? It's like responsibilities. Behavior sounds like you're talking to your kids, right? You tell your kids to behave. Watch your behavior. You know what happens as adults? We don't get told that very much, do we? We don't. We don't get talked to very much like that. People don't say to us, hey, adult, 42-year-old man with a job and kids, you behave yourself. But maybe we should. Because your behavior in our family matters. And that's what you have probably heard lesson after lesson about. This is not the first family day, right? You have probably seen lectures or gone to lectures or listened to sermons or listened to classes about all of the things that God says about how to behave in a family. Scriptures are full of them. And so it wouldn't make sense for me today to try to find one piece and pull it out and say, here you go, this is what you need to do in a family, or this is how a father is supposed to act to a child, or a child to their parents, or a mother to their children, or brothers to each other. It wouldn't make sense for me to pull one of those things out, except to say, this is how we sum them all up. God says, behave yourself in your families. Behave yourself. Because it matters what you do. It impacts the people who are closest to you. And isn't that sometimes one of the things that we take most for granted? That it's easier for us to get lax in our behavior in our family. We can put on a really good behavior for strangers, but maybe not so for the people in our own house. But God tells us over and over again to behave ourselves because it matters. But there's a family that's even greater than the one we're in based on blood. And of course, that's God's family. God's family matters. Now, John Donne is talking about humanity as a whole based on how we're connected with the world and all humankind. But God takes that one step further. He says in 1 John 3, see how great a love the Father has given us, that we would be called children of God. John connects this idea of family, God's family, children of his, with love. John is saying that God loves us so much that he adopts us into his family. We become children of his. And that's such a beautiful picture, and that's why John says it's so great to see this. But guess what that means? That we don't all get to be children, we don't get to all be only children in God's family. I think sometimes we act like we're only children in God's family. Now, I got to be an only child for 16 years. You know Lauren, right? Wonderful. Love you. Is this videoed, right? Love you, Lauren. You're the best. But I got to be an only child for 16 years. There's some perks to being an only child. And perhaps sometimes we take that mentality into our family of God. It's like God, and then, oh yeah, I got brother Jesus. But then it's me. It's me, right? I mean, I get to be the focus. I get to be the one. I get to be the one that God cares about and thinks about and is just so focused on me and my future that sometimes we forget that we're all children of God. And that means we have to get along. That means that you are heirs of the promise just like I am heirs of the promise. And so that the actions in God's family matters too. The actions that we take in this family of God as children of his actually matter. Sometimes we can get so focused on our relationship with God that we forget to be focused on our relationship with each other in God's family. Paul talks about this a little bit in 1 Corinthians 12. This is sort of the body chapter that Paul uses the illustration of the body to describe God's family, his children. And it's a great illustration because it shows us the interconnectivity of the family. I mean, your body works in concert. Okay, it used to work in concert with each other, with itself, right? I know as we get older, they start fighting amongst my body, starts disagreeing with itself. But the design is that it works together. And that's what Paul says the body of Christ is supposed to be. What we are, the family of God, is supposed to be. We're supposed to have different skills, abilities, blessings that God has given to us, and we work all in a concert with one another. And he uses this wonderful illustration of talking about different body parts trying to become other body parts, and how absurd it is, but it's to prove the point that we all have a role to play. But what's important in this is that we all have to function together. We all have to move as a unit together. Because it would not work in our physical bodies, and it doesn't work in the family of church, the family of God. He sort of finishes this chapter by talking about this verse in 26, showing us how connected the body is supposed to be. When one part suffers, all the parts suffer. When one part is honored, all the parts rejoice. We don't act in ways that are independent of each other. And you know that. You know that when you are injured in some capacity, it affects all of you. You don't get to just forget about your foot that's hurting. It affects everything that you are. And at the same time, if something is successful in me, if I'm speaking clearly, successfully, or I am moving in a way that is an achievement, like we just came off of the Olympics, and we don't all of a sudden have, the kidney say, I didn't win the gold medal, but the rest of the body did. It doesn't make any sense. What we see is that the body works together, and the things that impact it and affect it affect the whole. So, to move in parallel to what we have seen in our physical human families, we see the same here. Guess what? Your behavior in God's family matters. It does. I don't know that we spend a lot of time thinking about this. We may have spent time, lessons, classes, thinking about how our actions impact the family around us, the blood family. I mean, there's countless scriptures we can talk about in that realm. But I don't know that we spend enough time thinking about how my behavior impacts you. I mean, no, not like some universal you, literally you. The people in this room. The people who meet here in this building in Waterford. And we can extrapolate that a little further and talk about how we have the church that meets in the Metro Detroit region, the church that meets in Michigan, the church that meets in the United States, the church that meets in the world. But truly, on a micro level, how your behavior impacts the people in this room, in the church. That matters. That matters. Sometimes we see it in a way that comes from when we're hurting, right? Prayer requests. When somebody is sick or dying. When I need some physical need met. We sort of understand rallying around one another and coming together as the body and being strong. But what we don't spend a lot of time thinking about is how we behave all the rest of the times of the year. And the way that impacts the church, the family, God's family. It matters. Look what Paul says in Galatians chapter 5. For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Okay, Paul reminds us that we are related in the blood of Christ. You were called to freedom. We've been freed from sin. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh. but serve one another through love. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, take care that you're not consumed by one another. All right, I've only been here like 40 minutes, right, in this building. But I can guess, because I know that in every congregation, in every group of believers, everybody likes each other and gets along. It's universal. My apologies for being facetious, because it's not. The infighting within the church is disgusting. It just is. And Paul warns us about this. You know how long ago this was written? This isn't new information. I didn't just unearth this. He warns the church then, and it's just as applicable in 2021, when he says, be careful taking bites out of each other, because guess what's going to happen in the end? There isn't going to be anything left. And we've all seen that happen. You see, it's the same thing that we do in our own households, our physical households, right? Right? We sort of, pick on each other and we do little things to each other. And not always the nicest we are, because our family gets to see us at our worst, right? They get to see us when we're tired and when we're hungry. And we're not always treating each other the best. Well, we carry that same mentality over to God's family. And we start picking at each other and biting each other, and all of a sudden we find out that there's nothing left. And now animosity and disagreement and anger has entered into the family. And Paul says, you got to watch that. But it comes from a place that we don't intend to do that. But as Paul says, it comes from a place of freedom. Because we start thinking about that, our actions don't really matter. I have the freedom to do what I want to do. I have the right, I have the right to do what I want to do. And so then I start exerting what I want to do. I start exerting my freedom upon you. And then lo and behold, you have a different opinion than me. And you exert your freedoms. And now we're feuding. Your behavior in God's family matters. It just does. We stand so strongly behind my rightness that I fail to recognize our commonality. We're a family. We're children. Now, children have fought since Genesis 3. But we can all agree that that's not the right outcome. Your behavior in God's family matters. I can't help myself. I'm not one of those real deep Bible scholar people, but I do like looking at the lexicons. I do like looking at the Hebrew and the Greek, because I often find very interesting connections. So the Hebrew word for family is this. I'm not a native Hebrew speaker, okay? I don't know if you knew that. But it's mishpacha. Mishpacha. Family. And the meaning is exactly what you would think it would mean. Family. Well, we know a family. But the common root to this word, the shared ancestry, is this. Oh, another one. Shivka. And shivka comes from the root that the word for family comes from, but it doesn't mean family. It means servant. I love it when a plan comes together. that we see in Hebrew, the commonality in a family is servitude. I mean, doesn't that sum up what God has said the family should be? Ones that serve one another. Remember Genesis 2? What was God looking for Adam? A helper. Not for him to be served, but to define that relationship that a family would be. One that serves one another. And it's true in your household and with your blood relatives, but it is certainly true in God's family. If we have a family of God that is serving one another, then guess what we don't have time to do? How many of you, this is going to earn me some points, how many of you have a mom like me? Christmas, like 3 months from now. How many of you have a mom like me? That makes the meal, that cleans the house, that does all of the wonderful things. But what you find at the Thanksgivings and the Christmases and the big dinners and the big meals is that everyone else will have eaten before mom. Do you have that? Like, we will have eaten all of the turkey as she has still been carving up the remnants to have the turkey 3 days later. And now perhaps for you, it's an aunt or an uncle or a dad or a grandpa or a cousin or some friend, but you have that person in your family circle that's the servant. You see, what's interesting about that is that when we are serving in our families as God has called us to serve, then we don't have time to eat each other. When I've been working a long day, even just cleaning the house, I'm too tired to do anything else. I think that's what we're supposed to be in God's family. Not the person that has just gotten, fat and lazy, eating all the stuff up, but the one on the ground scrubbing the floors. Because when I do that, I don't have the energy to attack you. That's what a family is. Full of servants, serving one another. And Paul sums that up beautifully in Galatians 6. He says, while we have the opportunity, meaning while you're still breathing, let us do good for all people, and especially those who are in the household of faith. I mean, do good things, serve all mankind, love your neighbors as yourself. But where we should be doing it the most is right here. Right here. In your family. Because that's what matters. And truly, nothing matters more than family. In 1902, in Fratterville, Tennessee, one of the greatest mine disasters in U.S. history occurred. 216 miners died when a shaft collapsed. And it's tragic and terrible to think about, but what was worse is 26 of them didn't die in the initial impact. They escaped into a side tunnel. And they had long enough to write some letters. Rescuers would eventually get to them a few days later and find them all having died of asphyxia. But not after they recovered what they wrote. One of these letters was written by a man named Jacob Vowell to his wife, Ellen. And it says this: Ellen, darling, goodbye for us both. Albert, his 14-year-old son, was next to him. Albert said the Lord has saved him. We are all praying for air to support us, but it's getting so bad without any air. Ellen, I want you to live right and come to heaven. Raise the children the best you can. Oh, how I wish to be with you. Goodbye. Bury me and Albert in the same grave by little Eddie. Goodbye, Ellen. Goodbye, Lily. Goodbye, Jemmy. Goodbye, Horace. We are together. It's 25 minutes after 2, and there are a few of us alive yet. Signed, Jake and Albert. And he adds this postscript that breaks your heart. He says, "Oh God, for one more breath. Ellen, remember me as long as you live. Goodbye, darling." It's a picture of Jacob and Lily, which hits pretty close to home. I had no idea I was naming my daughter after her. But he says, "Oh, for one more breath." Do you think if he took that one more breath, he'd want to tear down his kids? You think he wants to fight with his wife? You think he wants to complain that the meatloaf was overcooked? No. What he wouldn't do to serve his family for one more breath. You see, that's why family matters, because nothing else does. At the end of our lives, this is all that will remain. Our relationship with the people around us in our family, our relationship with the people who are children of God, and our relationship with our Father. That's all that matters. So while we still have opportunity, as Paul says, we should do good. But especially to those in our family. Family matters. Family matters so much that God took his son to die for you to be heirs. And if you're here this morning and have had the opportunity to accept that gift of grace, be washed in baptism with him, and to be heirs for the promise in the kingdom, this is your opportunity. For any other needs that can be met, you are invited to come forward as we stand and sing.